I stared at my phone screen in complete disbelief. There it was, Jessica's Instagram post glaring back at me. Ugh, why do men always think they own you? The words hit me like a slap across the face. Just 12 hours earlier, I had asked her not to go on that weekend trip with her ex-boyfriend Marcus. Now she was publicly shaming me, painting me as some controlling partner when all I wanted was basic respect in our relationship. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the comments of her friends cheering her on. I felt betrayed, misunderstood, and completely blindsided. Before I tell you how this story completely changed my perspective on relationships, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever felt misunderstood in a relationship. And make sure to subscribe, because what happened next will show you exactly why. Sometimes the best response is no response at all. Trust me, you will not see this coming. Well, let me take you back to how Jessica and I even got to this point. 8 months ago, I was living my best life in Austin, Texas, working as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup. At 27, I thought I had figured out what I wanted in a relationship. I believed in trust communication and mutual respect. That was before I met Jessica. It was a typical Saturday morning at my favorite coffee shop downtown. I was reading a book about digital marketing when this stunning woman with flowing auburn hair approached my table. She had this bohemian vibe that immediately caught my attention. Her name was Jessica, 25 years old, and she taught yoga at a studio just 2 blocks away. She asked if she could share my table since everywhere else was packed, and we ended up talking for 3 hours straight. Jessica was unlike anyone I had ever dated. She was free-spirited, artistic, and had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. She painted in her spare time, loved hiking, and had traveled to more countries than I could count on my fingers. Coming from a fairly traditional family in suburban Dallas, I was drawn to her sense of adventure and spontaneity. Our first few months together felt like a fairy tale. We spent weekends brunching at food trucks, exploring hiking trails around Austin, and even started looking at apartments together. Jessica would drag me to art galleries and poetry readings while I introduced her to my love of vintage movies and cooking elaborate dinners at home. We seemed to complement each other perfectly. But looking back now, I can see the red flags that I chose to ignore. Jessica had this way of talking about her past relationships that always painted her as the victim. According to her, every guy she had ever dated was either too clingy, too controlling, or too insecure. She would roll her eyes when she told these stories, and I found myself nodding along, thinking how lucky I was to be different from those other guys. The biggest red flag, though, was how often she mentioned her ex-boyfriend Marcus. Marcus was a 30-year-old photographer who had dated Jessica for 2 years before they broke up 6 months prior to us meeting. According to Jessica, they had remained friends because they worked in similar creative fields and sometimes collaborated on projects. She made it sound completely innocent and professional. At first, I tried to be the understanding girlfriend. I did not want to come across as jealous or insecure, especially after hearing all those stories about her controlling ex-boyfriends. When Marcus would text her about potential photo shoots or creative collaborations, I would bite my tongue and smile supportively. When she would mention grabbing coffee with him to discuss business, I told myself that I trusted her completely. But as the weeks went on, the frequency of these interactions started to bother me. Marcus seemed to text Jessica almost daily, and their conversations always seemed to stretch longer than necessary for simple business discussions. I noticed that Jessica's phone would buzz at odd hours, and she would quickly grab it with a secretive smile that she never gave my messages. Whenever I gently brought up my discomfort about her relationship with Marcus, Jessica would immediately get defensive. She would accuse me of being insecure and compare me to her previous boyfriends who had tried to control who she could be friends with. "I thought you were different, Elise," she would say with disappointment in her voice. "I thought you trusted me." Those conversations always left me feeling guilty and questioning my own instincts. Maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe I was letting my own insecurities cloud my judgment. Jessica had never given me a concrete reason not to trust her, And I definitely did not want to be one of those controlling girlfriends she always complained about. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in late September. Jessica and I were cooking dinner together in my apartment when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and said, "Oh, it is Marcus. I should take this really quick." She stepped out onto my balcony to answer the call, speaking in hushed tones for nearly 20 minutes. When she came back inside, she had this excited energy about her. "So Marcus just got this amazing opportunity to do a photo shoot in Sedona this weekend," she announced while stirring the pasta sauce. He asked if I wanted to come along as his assistant and model for some of the shots. I felt my stomach drop. Sedona, Arizona was a 4-hour drive from Austin, which meant they would need to stay overnight. The thought of Jessica spending a romantic weekend in one of the most beautiful places in the country with her ex-boyfriend made me feel sick. "That sounds like a great opportunity for him," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Are you thinking about going?" Jessica turned to look at me with surprise in her eyes. "Well, yeah, of course I am thinking about it. This could be really good for my portfolio, and Marcus said he would pay me for modeling. Why would I not go?" I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. "I guess I just feel a little uncomfortable with you going away for the weekend with your ex-boyfriend. I mean, I trust you completely, but it just seems like a situation that could be complicated." The change in Jessica's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. Her face flushed red, and she set down the wooden spoon with more force than necessary. "Seriously, Elise, you are going to be one of those girlfriends now. I am not trying to be controlling," I said, my voice getting a little defensive despite my best efforts to stay calm. "I just think there are some boundaries that are important in relationships." "Boundaries." Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is just another word for control. Marcus is my friend and my colleague. This is a professional opportunity, nothing more. I cannot believe you are asking me to choose between my career and your insecurities." The argument escalated from there. Jessica accused me of being just like her previous boyfriends, while I tried to explain that I was not asking her to choose anything. I was simply expressing how I felt about the situation and hoping we could find a compromise that made both of us comfortable. After an hour of going in circles, Jessica finally threw up her hands in exasperation. "Fine," she said. "If it will make you happy, I will tell Marcus I cannot go. But I want you to know that I think this is ridiculous." I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt terrible. The way she agreed made it clear that she was only doing it to appease me, not because she understood my concerns or respected my feelings. For the rest of the week, Jessica was distant and cold. She would answer my texts with one-word responses and decline my suggestions for date nights. By Friday, I was starting to wonder if I had made a huge mistake. Maybe I really was being too controlling. Maybe I should have just trusted her and let her go on the trip. The guilt was eating me alive, and I was seriously considering telling Jessica that I had changed my mind and she should go to Sedona if she wanted to. That guilt evaporated completely when I came home from work Friday evening to find Jessica in our bedroom packing a weekend bag. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom watching Jessica fold clothes into her overnight bag like nothing had happened. My heart pounded as I tried to process what I was seeing. "What are you doing?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. Jessica did not even look up from her packing. "I am going to Sedona." "But we talked about this. You said you would not go." Finally, she turned to face me, and I could see the defiance burning in her eyes. "I changed my mind. I realized that I should not have to give up opportunities just because my girlfriend feels insecure." The word girlfriend came out like an accusation, like I was some burden she had to carry, rather than someone she loved. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Jessica, this is not about insecurity. This is about respect. We made an agreement as a couple." "No," she said, zipping up her bag with aggressive force. "You made a demand, and I stupidly went along with it because I did not want to fight. But I have been thinking about it all week, and I realized that this is exactly how my relationship with Tyler started. First, it was little things, then bigger things. until I could not even go to lunch with friends without getting the third degree. I am not Tyler, I said, feeling desperate. I am not trying to control you. I just think that going away for the weekend with your ex-boyfriend crosses a line. Jessica slung her bag over her shoulder and walked toward me. For a moment, I thought she might have changed her mind, but instead, she stopped right in front of me and looked me directly in the eyes. You do not own me, Elise, she said coldly. This is exactly why my last relationship failed. I will not let it happen again. Before I could respond, she brushed past me and headed for the front door. I followed her, my mind racing for something to say that would make her understand. If you go on this trip, I called after her, I think we need to seriously reconsider our relationship. Jessica paused with her hand on the doorknob. For a second, I hoped she would turn around, that we could work this out. Instead, she shrugged without looking back. Then I guess we will have that conversation when I get back, she said, and then she was gone. I spent Friday night pacing around my apartment, alternating between rage and heartbreak. How had we gotten to this point? How had a simple conversation about boundaries turned into Jessica walking out? I kept replaying our fight in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently. Saturday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with a notification. Still groggy, I reached for it and saw that Jessica had posted something on Instagram. What I saw made me instantly wide awake. There was Jessica taking a selfie at what looked like the Austin airport. She was wearing the sundress I had bought her for her birthday, smiling radiantly at the camera. But it was not the photo that made my blood boil. It was the caption. Ugh, why do men always think they own you? She had written, complete with an eye roll emoji. Sometimes you just need to do what makes you happy, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Life is too short to let others dictate your choices. #independent, woman #living my best life. I read it 3 times before the full impact hit me. Jessica had not just ignored our agreement and gone on the trip anyway. She had publicly humiliated me in the process. She had taken our private relationship conflict and turned it into content for her social media followers, painting me as some controlling monster, while positioning herself as the victim. What made it worse was that she had deliberately misrepresented the situation. She had written men plural as if this was a pattern of behavior from multiple guys, when she knew perfectly well that I was a woman. She was either so caught up in her victim narrative that she forgot who she was dating, or she was deliberately obscuring our relationship to make her story sound more compelling. I scrolled through the comments feeling sicker with each one. Her friends were cheering her on with messages like, "You go, girl, and do not let anyone dim your light," and "Men are so threatened by strong women." One of her yoga students had written, "This is why I love following you. You are such an inspiration." None of them knew the real story. None of them knew that Jessica was talking about her girlfriend, not some toxic boyfriend. None of them knew that I had simply asked for basic consideration and respect in our relationship, not demanded that she quit her career or cut off all her friendships. I felt betrayed on a level I had never experienced before. It was one thing for Jessica to ignore my feelings and go on the trip anyway. It was another thing entirely for her to publicly shame me while doing it. She had taken our most vulnerable moment as a couple and weaponized it for social media validation. As I sat there staring at my phone, something shifted inside me. The hurt and confusion I had been feeling all week suddenly crystallized into a cold, clear understanding. This was not about the trip to Sedona. This was not even about Marcus. This was about the fact that Jessica fundamentally did not respect me or our relationship. I thought back over our 8 months together with this new perspective. How many times had Jessica dismissed my concerns by accusing me of being controlling? How many times had she compared me to her ex-boyfriends whenever I tried to express my needs? How many times had she made me feel like I was asking for too much when all I wanted was basic consideration? I realized that Jessica had been gaslighting me from the very beginning. She had trained me to doubt my own instincts and question my own feelings. Whenever I felt uncomfortable with something she was doing, she would turn it around on me, making me feel like the problem was my insecurity rather than her behavior. The pattern was so clear now. Jessica would do whatever she wanted. And then when I expressed any discomfort, she would accuse me of being controlling and compare me to her toxic ex-boyfriends. It was a brilliant manipulation strategy because it made me desperate to prove that I was different, that I was the cool girlfriend who would never try to restrict her freedom. But healthy relationships are not about one person doing whatever they want while the other person swallows their feelings to avoid being labeled as controlling. Healthy relationships are about mutual respect, communication, and consideration for your partner's feelings. Jessica had never been willing to give me any of those things. As this realization washed over me, I felt something I had not expected: relief. For months, I had been twisting myself into knots, trying to be the perfect girlfriend for someone who was never going to appreciate my efforts. I had been so afraid of losing Jessica that I had lost myself in the process. Well, I was done with that. If Jessica wanted to paint me as the villain in her story, then maybe it was time for me to embrace that role. Maybe it was time to show her what controlling behavior actually looked like. I opened Facebook and navigated to my relationship status. Without hesitation, I changed it from "in a relationship with Jessica" to "single." Then I went through my Instagram and removed every photo of us together. I deleted her number from my emergency contacts and took her name off my Netflix account. It felt incredibly empowering to take control of my own narrative for once. Jessica wanted to act like she was single. Well, now she actually was. The first thing I did after changing my relationship status was block Jessica on all social media platforms. I did not want to see any more updates from her weekend getaway, and I definitely did not want her to be able to continue using our relationship drama as content for her followers. Next, I gathered all of Jessica's belongings that were scattered around my apartment. Over 8 months, she had gradually moved in pieces of her life: a toothbrush here, some clothes there, her favorite coffee mug, a few books, her yoga mat. I carefully packed everything into 2 boxes and set them outside my front door with a note that simply said, "Your things." By the time I finished cleaning out any trace of Jessica from my space, it was only noon on Saturday. I felt strangely energetic, like I had just removed a weight from my shoulders that I had not even realized I was carrying. For the first time in months, my apartment felt like it was truly mine again. I was just settling in with a cup of tea and a book when my phone started buzzing. The caller ID showed Jessica's number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Voicemail again. Then again. After the fifth call in 10 minutes, I decided to listen to the first voicemail just to see what she had to say. "Elise, what the hell?" Jessica's voice sounded confused and slightly panicked. "I just saw that you changed your relationship status to single. What is going on? Call me back immediately." The second voicemail came in about 20 minutes later, and her tone had shifted from confusion to anger. "Okay, I do not know what kind of game you are playing, but this is incredibly immature. You cannot just unilaterally decide that we are broken up because you are mad about something. We need to talk about this like adults." By the third voicemail, which arrived around 3 in the afternoon, Jessica sounded genuinely upset. "Elise, please pick up your phone. I am really worried about you. I know you are mad about the trip, but we can work through this. I do not understand why you are being so dramatic about everything." I almost laughed at that last word. I was being dramatic. This from the woman who had just posted a public rant about men trying to own her because I had asked for basic respect in our relationship. The calls kept coming throughout the afternoon. Jessica left 7 voicemails between noon and 6 p.m., each one showing a different stage of grief. First denial, then anger, then bargaining, then depression. She promised to come home early, promised we could talk about boundaries, promised to be more considerate of my feelings. But it was too little too late. I was done being the understanding girlfriend who swallowed her feelings to keep the peace. I was done being manipulated and gaslighted every time I tried to express my needs. Most importantly, I was done being with someone who would publicly humiliate me for social media clout. Around 6:30, my friend Madison called to check in. Madison and I had been friends since college, and she had never been Jessica's biggest fan, though she had been too polite to say so directly. "I saw your relationship status change," she said without preamble. "Are you okay?" I gave Madison the full story about the weekend trip, the fight, and Jessica's social media post. By the time I finished, Madison was furious on my behalf. "I cannot believe she posted that," Madison said. "And she did not even have the decency to represent the situation accurately. She made it sound like you are some controlling boyfriend, when all you did was express your feelings about a pretty reasonable boundary." "I keep wondering if I overreacted," I admitted. "Maybe I should have just let her go on the trip." "Absolutely not," Madison said firmly. "Elise, you asked your girlfriend not to go away for the weekend with her ex-boyfriend. That is not controlling, that is basic relationship sanity. The fact that she not only ignored your feelings, but then publicly shamed you for having them, tells you everything you need to know about who she really is." Madison paused for a moment, then continued. "You know what, you should come out tonight. My coworker David is in town visiting, and a group of us are going to that new Italian place downtown. You need to get out of your apartment and remember that there are people who actually appreciate you." Normally, I would have declined. I was not in the mood to be social, and the last thing I wanted was to put on a brave face and pretend everything was fine. But something about Madison's invitation appealed to me. Maybe it was time to start living my life for me, instead of sitting around waiting for Jessica to call. "You know what?" I said. "That actually sounds perfect." I spent an hour getting ready, putting on my favorite dress, and actually doing my hair for the first time in weeks. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I realized how long it had been since I had dressed up for myself rather than for Jessica. I had forgotten how good it felt to feel confident and beautiful on my own terms. Madison picked me up at 8, and we headed to the restaurant. The group turned out to be smaller than I had expected. Just Madison, her boyfriend Tom, and David, the coworker she had mentioned. David was not what I had expected at all. He was tall and lean with kind eyes and an easy smile. Madison had mentioned that he was an architect, and I had pictured some pretentious artsy type. Instead, David was down to earth and genuinely interested in hearing about other people's lives. Over dinner, we talked about everything except my relationship drama. David told funny stories about construction sites and difficult clients. Madison updated us on her latest adventures in online dating. Tom entertained us with tales from his job as a high school teacher. For the first time in weeks, I found myself laughing genuinely and forgetting about the stress that had been consuming my life. David had this way of asking thoughtful questions that made me feel like he was actually listening to my answers. When I mentioned my work in marketing, he wanted to know about specific campaigns I had worked on and what I found most challenging about the industry. "I have to admit," David said at one point, "I always thought marketing was just about trying to trick people into buying things they do not need. But the way you talk about understanding consumer behavior and creating genuine connections between brands and people makes it sound like actual psychology." I was impressed that he had taken the time to really think about what I had said, rather than just nodding politely and changing the subject. It occurred to me that Jessica had never shown that kind of genuine interest in my work. She would ask how my day was, but her eyes would glaze over if I tried to share any details about projects I was excited about. As we were getting ready to leave the restaurant, David turned to me and said, "I hope this does not sound too forward, but I would love to continue this conversation sometime. Would you be interested in getting coffee this week?" 6 months ago, I would have automatically declined explaining that I was in a relationship. 3 hours ago, I would have felt guilty about even considering it. But sitting there looking at David's hopeful expression, I realized that I was genuinely excited about the possibility of getting to know him better. "I would really like that," I said and meant it. We exchanged numbers, and David suggested meeting Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop near his hotel. As Madison drove me home, I felt lighter than I had in months. "David seems really nice," Madison said, glancing at me with a knowing smile. "He does," I agreed. It was just nice to have a normal conversation with someone who was not trying to manipulate me or make me feel bad about myself. When I got home, my phone showed 23 missed calls from Jessica, all from the past few hours. There were also dozens of text messages ranging from confused to angry to desperate. I scrolled through a few of them, but they all followed the same pattern. How could you do this to us? This is not how relationships work. We need to talk. But here is the thing that Jessica did not understand. We had already talked. We had talked when I expressed my concerns about her relationship with Marcus. We had talked when I asked her not to go on the weekend trip. We had talked when she decided to ignore my feelings and go anyway. The time for talking was over. Jessica had made her choice when she prioritized her ex-boyfriend and her social media image over our relationship. Now I was making mine. I turned off my phone and went to bed sleeping better than I had in weeks. Sunday morning arrived with a sense of calm I had not felt in months. I woke up naturally around 9, made myself a proper breakfast, and sat on my balcony with coffee and the newspaper. For the first time in weeks, I was not anxiously checking my phone or wondering what mood Jessica would be in. Around noon, I heard footsteps on the stairs leading to my apartment, followed by frantic knocking on my door. I knew it was Jessica before I even looked through the peephole. She must have driven back from Sedona early, just like she had promised in her voicemails. "Elise, I know you are in there," Jessica called through the door. "Your car is in the parking lot. We need to talk about this." I took a deep breath and opened the door. Jessica looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was messy, her makeup was smudged, and her clothes were wrinkled like she had slept in them. Behind her on the landing were the 2 boxes of her belongings, exactly where I had left them. "Can I come in?" she asked, but she was already moving toward the door like she expected me to step aside. Instead, I stayed firmly planted in the doorway. "I think we can have this conversation right here." Jessica's eyes widened in surprise. She was not used to me standing my ground. "Elise, come on. Do not be ridiculous. We cannot have a serious conversation in the hallway where all your neighbors can hear." "There is nothing ridiculous about it," I said calmly. "You made our relationship business public when you posted about it on Instagram. Now you can deal with the consequences." "That post was not about you specifically," Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It was about a general pattern I have noticed in dating." "Really?" I asked. "So it is just a coincidence that you posted it 12 hours after walking out on me to go away for the weekend with your ex-boyfriend?" Jessica had the grace to look ashamed for about 2 seconds before her defensive walls went back up. "Look, I know you are upset about the trip, but I made a mistake. I should have handled things differently. I was just so frustrated because I felt like you were trying to control me, and I reacted badly." "I was not trying to control you," I said, feeling that familiar surge of frustration. "I was trying to communicate with you about something that made me uncomfortable in our relationship." "There is a difference." "I know that now," Jessica said quickly. "That is what I realized while I was away. I should have listened to your concerns instead of getting defensive. Marcus and I barely even talked during the trip because I was so worried about what was happening with us." I almost laughed. Even now, even in her apology, Jessica was managing to work in a mention of Marcus and how innocent their trip had been. "Jessica," I said, "this is not about the trip. This is not even about Marcus. This is about the fact that you do not respect me or our relationship." "That is not true," she protested. "I love you, Elise. I know I made a mistake, but that does not mean I do not respect you." "You publicly humiliated me on social media," I said. "You took the most vulnerable moment in our relationship and turned it into content for your followers. You painted me as some controlling boyfriend while positioning yourself as the victim. How is that respectful?" Jessica's face crumpled, and tears started streaming down her cheeks. I was hurt and angry, and I was not thinking clearly. I know it was wrong. I deleted the post as soon as I realized how it must have made you feel. "The damage was already done," I replied. "Your friends had already seen it and commented on it. You had already gotten the validation you were looking for. Deleting it after the fact does not undo the betrayal." "Please," Jessica said, reaching for my hand. "I know I messed up, but we can work through this. I promise I will do better. I promise I will listen to you and respect your feelings." I looked down at her hand on mine and felt nothing. No spark, no warmth, no desire to comfort her. That was when I knew for certain that this relationship was truly over. Jessica, I said, gently pulling my hand away. Love without respect is not love at all. It is just attachment, and I deserve more than that. But I do respect you, she insisted. I know it does not seem like it right now, but I do. I just have trouble with boundaries because of my past relationships. Your past relationships are not my responsibility to fix, I said. I cannot be your therapist and your girlfriend at the same time. You need to work through your issues before you can be in a healthy relationship with anyone. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when she realized that I was serious. This was not just a fight that we would work through. This was not just drama that would blow over in a few days. This was the end. So that is it, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 8 months together, and you are just going to throw it all away because of one fight. This was not one fight, I said. This was 8 months of you dismissing my feelings, manipulating me when I tried to express my needs, and refusing to respect basic boundaries in our relationship. The Instagram post was just the final straw. Jessica picked up her boxes with shaking hands. I hope you know what you are giving up, she said, trying to inject some venom into her voice, but it just came out sad. I do, I said. I am giving up the constant anxiety, the gaslighting, and the feeling like I am not good enough for someone who should love me unconditionally. I am giving up walking on eggshells around someone who claims to love me. After Jessica left, I went back inside and made myself lunch. Then I called my therapist and scheduled an appointment for later that week. I wanted to process what had happened and make sure I learned from this experience, instead of just repeating the same patterns in my next relationship. Over the following weeks, I started to rebuild my life on my own terms. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the intense months with Jessica. I picked up hobbies that I had abandoned because Jessica found them boring. I started taking a pottery class that I had always wanted to try but never had because Jessica thought it was pointless. My coffee date with David turned into dinner dates, which turned into long walks around Austin and lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper together. David was everything that Jessica was not: consistent, respectful, and genuinely interested in building something together, rather than just taking what he could get. When David and I had our first disagreement about 3 months in, I braced myself for the manipulation and gaslighting that I had learned to expect from romantic conflict. Instead, David listened to my concerns, acknowledged where I was coming from, and worked with me to find a solution that made both of us comfortable. Is this how healthy relationships are supposed to work? I asked him one evening as we were cooking dinner together. What do you mean? He asked, looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. You actually listen when I tell you something bothers me, I said. You do not make me feel crazy or controlling for having feelings. David set down his knife and looked at me seriously. Elise, your feelings are always valid. I might not always agree with your perspective, but I would never try to make you feel bad for having one. That is what partners are supposed to do for each other. 6 months after Jessica and I broke up, I ran into her at a farmer's market downtown. She looked good, healthy, and happy. She was with a new girlfriend, a petite blonde who looked young and slightly overwhelmed by Jessica's larger-than-life personality. Elise, Jessica called out when she spotted me. How are you? You look great. I am doing really well, I said honestly. How are you? Good, really good. This is Amanda, she said, introducing the blonde. Amanda, this is Elise, my ex. Amanda smiled politely, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. I wondered if Jessica had already started the same patterns with her that she had used on me. It was good to see you, I said to Jessica, meaning it. I hope you are happy. As I walked away, I heard Jessica saying something to Amanda about how I had always been too serious, too controlling. I felt a pang of sympathy for Amanda, but I also felt grateful that I was no longer the one having to defend myself against those accusations. That evening, I told David about running into Jessica. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had stayed together?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said finally. "I know exactly what would have happened. I would have spent years doubting myself, accepting less than I deserved, and slowly losing pieces of who I am. Breaking up with Jessica was the best thing I ever did for myself. Even though it was painful at the time, especially because it was painful," I said. "That pain taught me what I will and will not accept in a relationship. It taught me the difference between love and attachment, between compromise and self-sacrifice. Looking back now, I am grateful for every difficult moment of that relationship and its ending. Jessica taught me what I do not want in a partner. She showed me the warning signs of manipulation and gaslighting. Most importantly, she forced me to learn how to stand up for myself and walk away from situations that are not serving me. Sometimes the people who claim we are trying to control them are actually the ones trying to control us. The moment I stopped fighting for someone who would not fight for our relationship was the moment I started fighting for myself. And that made all the difference." Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt like you were walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing yourself? Have you ever had someone accuse you of being controlling when all you wanted was basic respect? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I would love to hear your stories. If this resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And do not forget to subscribe for more real talk about relationships, boundaries, and learning to value yourself. Remember, you deserve someone who respects you enough to consider your feelings, not someone who makes you feel guilty for having them. Until next time, keep fighting for the love you deserve.